Amendment proposed, after clause 69, insert the new clause, words as printed on the Marshall list.
My Lords, I must declare an interest in the subject as Executive Director of the Telegraph Media Group and draw attention to my other media interests in the Register. I very much welcome this amendment, although I have some concerns about aspects of the drafting. The noble Lord Strasburger is to be congratulated for shining a spotlight onto an incredibly serious and troubling issue arising from a piece of legislation that is now looking increasingly arcane, and I agree fundamentally with him. We can't wait for a permanent solution to this. It's an issue which should concern every reporter in the UK. It's an issue which should concern every citizen because of the impact on press freedom and the quality of our democracy. And it's an issue also which has a resonance beyond our shores, which should be a real worry to us, because what we're doing in the United Kingdom is sending an authoritarian message to the rest of the world that it's all right for police forces or other public authorities to track down the confidential sources of journalists. My Lords, I don't need to dwell on the importance of confidential sources of information. It was best put in the case of Goodwin versus the United Kingdom in the European Court back in 1996, and I quote briefly, "Without protection, sources may be deterred from assisting the press in informing the public on matters of public interest. As a result, the vital public watchdog role of the press may be undermined, and the ability of the press to provide accurate and reliable information may be adversely affected." That is absolutely right. The use of confidential sources, as we've heard, is vital for whistleblowing and investigative journalism, but it is also crucial for day-to-day reporting on matters of public interest. In a democratic society, people need to be able to talk to the media about current debates without fear of reprisal or retribution. The alternative is sterile political and public debate with a profound impact on the substance of our character and our democracy. But that's what will happen unless the chilling impact of this out-of-date legislation is not reversed. My Lords, I have to say it's a matter of regret to me to have to ask why we should have been surprised by such recent revelations. The Newspaper Society, representing Britain's regional press, and the Society of Editors made clear during the passage of RIPA back in 2000 that its terms would inevitably lead to an erosion of the confidentiality of sources because they could so often be easily identified by information obtained under the new powers by a wide range of specified organisations. The newspaper industry at the time suggested that a number of organisations able to exercise RIPA powers should be limited, that the ground for the use of those powers should also be strictly limited to the most senior personnel, and that all applications for use of such power should be subjected to prior judicial scrutiny, especially to protect confidential sources. The Act, as it arrived on the statute book and various codes since then, clearly did not provide adequate safeguards in any way. And over the years, I've heard since then anecdotal evidence about the problems, often from local newspaper editors, voicing their concerns often about attempts to trace the source of leaks of council information by local authorities using RIPA powers of surveillance and access to telephone records. Occasionally, a case of this did arise in the public domain. Back in 2010, my Lords, the Derby Telegraph reported on how the local authority there had dispatched 2 officers to a local Starbucks to spy on a reporter who had been seen talking to current and former council employees. And that council used RIPA powers to do that because they give local authorities the right to watch and record people covertly. Just think about the disastrous impact on local press reporting of local authorities if such sources of information dried up. But more importantly, I think we need to think about the impact on local people and democracy. Incompetence, waste and corruption in local government would remain uncovered and unpunished, and it's ordinary people who pay the bills for that who would really suffer. Of course, as the noble Lord said, we're only now beginning to see the full extent of this problem, partly as a result of the work of the Mail on Sunday, which helped uncover this abuse through a sheer stroke of luck, followed up by a brilliant piece of investigative journalism. And my real concern is that we may only be seeing the tip of the iceberg, as the noble Lord Strasburger said. We just have no idea about the extent of the abuse. And other examples that I've heard are extremely troubling. I draw noble Lord's attention to this disturbing case of Sally Muir, recently highlighted in Press Gazette. In this case, Thames Valley Police applied to a court to bug the conversations of this lady, but did not tell the court that she was a journalist when it did so. And recently that force had to admit that it used RIPA powers to bug the car of her alleged police source back in 2006. If either the law or a statutory code had forced police to make that clear, it would, as Gavin Miller, her QC, has said, have ensured that, and I quote, the authorising authority would have had the chance to use the correct and very strict legal test for overriding journalist source protection. He also made the point that the use of the Act in this way, which he described as widespread, is almost certainly completely illegal under European law. My Lord's mention of Europe leads me to a very brief point. I said earlier that I'm anxious about the impact of this issue beyond our shores. It doesn't take a great deal of imagination to see how a government in a Commonwealth country might look at how the law is being utilised here and deploy something similar in a turbocharged manner in their own country. And that's something that is already causing considerable concerns among World Press Freedom organisations. Ronald Coven, the acting director of the World Press Freedom Committee, wrote to me and put it this way: police the world over have repeatedly shown they cannot be trusted to exercise needed self-restraint, and their zeal must be contained by independent judicial supervision. And that has unhappily proven to be the case in Britain as well, and it is a view of the World Press Freedom Committee that the law should be amended to impose appropriate and effective judicial oversight. And my Lords, we need to be mindful of the way that this issue feeds into debates in Europe. There, the European Newspaper Publishers Association, on whose board I sit, has made representation on the protection of journalistic sources in respect of very similar EU legislation on access to communications content, communications data and surveillance. In the context of this issue, this amendment highlights those concerns also need to be treated with the utmost seriousness if we're not to end up in exactly the same position in a few years' time. My Lords, I'm aware that the Noble Lord has produced this as a probing amendment, and of course he's absolutely right to do so. I support the principles behind it, particularly that of prior judicial authorisation, but as I said, I have some concerns about the detail because I don't believe it would actually deliver the extremely high threshold that should be needed for police or other authorities to be able to access journalists' sources. I also don't think judicial authorisation would necessarily apply in all the cases where RIPA powers can be deployed. It is a very good start, but I think further thought needs to be given in those areas. There are, of course, my Lords, now a number of inquiries into this whole issue and the abuse of RIPA. I believe the impact on press freedom and on the quality of our democracy should be guiding features of those inquiries. I hope my noble friend will listen to the strength of the feeling, and that either in this House or in another place the government will come back with its own amendment to deal with the issue which the Noble Lord's amendment has highlighted so importantly today, and which in a free society we should treat with the utmost seriousness.
I also rise to support the amendment.